just sent my stepsister to prison for spiking my water with sedatives to frame me for insanity. And 10 minutes later, I evicted my own mother onto the street with nothing but the clothes on her back. This is the brutal reality of my mom chose stepsister over me. Now she regrets it. I am sitting here in my $2 million home, shaking uncontrollably, wondering how a simple act of family kindness turned into a criminal investigation. It began the moment my stepsister, Tiffany, moved in with her newborn baby and demanded my office, my car, and my life. They used that innocent child as a weapon to guilt trip me, while my mother stood by and watched them drain my bank accounts and gaslight me into thinking I was losing my mind. They thought they could steal my inheritance by painting me as the villain, but they did not know I was recording every single move they made. I have destroyed their lives to save my own. And now my house is a fortress of silence. I have my money. I have my justice. But I have absolutely no one left to call family. Please tell me, Sao Yu Tsing Haoling, 2# is greater than did I do the right thing? Or have I become the monster they said I was? My name is Reagan Vance. I am 32 years old, the chief financial officer of a mid-sized logistics firm that quietly moves the supply chain of the East Coast. I live in a colonial-style estate in the secluded hills of Westport, Connecticut, a place where the driveways are long, the hedges are high, and the neighbors only speak to you to complain about the landscaping service. To the outside world, I am the picture of the modern American success story. I am self-made, disciplined, and fiercely independent. But inside the walls of this 4,000 square foot house, I am nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. I bought this house 3 years ago. It was not just an investment. It was a reclamation. My biological father, a man of few words but immense dignity, had left me a substantial trust fund and a life insurance policy when he passed away from pancreatic cancer. He always wanted a home with a library, a place that smelled of cedar and old paper. He never got it. So I bought it for him. I moved my mother, Susan, and her husband, Arthur, in with me because I told myself it was the right thing to do. That is the lie I tell myself to sleep at night. The truth is, I wanted them to see it. I wanted Arthur, a man whose greatest financial achievement was dodging bankruptcy 3 times, to live under a roof provided by the man he tried so hard to erase. For a while, the arrangement worked. It was a Cold War fought with polite smiles and passive-aggressive dinner conversations. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the landscaping fees, and the country club memberships. In return, I expected silence and order. My life was compartmentalized. I spent 12 hours a day at the office, dissecting spreadsheets and firing incompetent managers. When I came home, I retreated to the study on the 2nd floor. That room was my sanctuary. It was the only room in the house that Arthur was not allowed to enter. It held my father's collection of first edition nautical history books, his vintage globe, and the smell of the tobacco pipe he never actually smoked but kept for the aesthetic. The peace, however fragile, was shattered on a Tuesday evening in November. I remember the date clearly. It was November 14th. The air in Connecticut was biting and gray, the kind of weather that seeps into your bones. I drove my Audi up the winding driveway, expecting the usual stillness. Instead, I saw a rusted, dented Ford Focus parked crookedly on the cobblestones, leaking a dark fluid onto my pristine pavement. The trunk was open, looking like a gaping mouth, vomiting trash bags and plastic bins onto the driveway. My stomach turned. It was a physical reaction, a rejection of what I knew was coming. I parked my car in the garage, took a deep breath, and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was composed. My eyeliner was sharp. I looked like a woman who could handle a hostile takeover, because that is exactly what this was. I walked into the foyer, the house, usually smelling of lemon, verbena, and floor wax, now reeked of stale formula and cheap vanilla body spray. Suitcases were piled high against the wainscoting, scratching the paint. "Reagan, you are home early." My mother came rushing out of the kitchen. She was wiping her hands on an apron, her face flushed with a nervous, frantic energy. She looked like a woman who had just hidden a body and was trying to distract the police with freshly baked cookies. "Whose car is in the driveway?" "Mom?" I asked, though I already knew. I kept my voice low, barely above a whisper. "It is Tiffany," she said, her smile wavering. "Oh, Reagan, it is terrible." She left him. She finally left that awful husband of hers. She had nowhere else to go. She has the baby, little Leo. You have not met him yet, have you? He is precious. Tiffany Moore, Arthur's daughter, my stepsister. The last time I saw her was 3 years ago at Christmas, where she called me a corporate robot before asking to borrow $500. "How long is she staying?" I asked, stepping over a pile of dirty laundry that had been dumped at the foot of the stairs, just until she gets back on her feet. My mother said, too quickly, "We have to be supportive. Reagan, family helps family." I did not answer. I walked past her, my heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. I needed to get to my office. I needed to sit in my father's leather chair and pour myself a glass of water and breathe. I needed to reestablish my boundaries before I suffocated. I climbed the stairs. As I reached the landing, I heard it, the sound of furniture being dragged across wood, a screeching, tearing sound that made my teeth ache. It was coming from the end of the hall. It was coming from my study. I stopped, my heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a sudden, cold fury. I walked to the door of the study. It was wide open. Inside, my sanctuary was being dismantled. Tiffany was standing in the center of the room. She wore sweatpants that dragged on the floor and a stained t-shirt. She was heavier than I remembered, her hair a chaotic mess of bleached blonde and dark roots. She was shoving my father's heavy oak desk, the desk he had restored with his own hands, against the far wall, right next to the radiator. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Tiffany jumped and spun around. She held a stack of my files in her hands. "Jesus, Reagan, you scared me. Do not sneak up on people like that." I looked around the room. My books were in a pile on the floor, treated like garbage. My ergonomic office chair had been pushed into the corner. Draped with a baby blanket, in the center of the room, where my desk used to command the space, stood a white, plastic crib. "I asked you a question," I said, stepping into the room. "Why are you moving my furniture?" "Mom did not tell you?" Tiffany blew a strand of hair out of her face. She did not look apologetic. She looked annoyed that I was interrupting her. "I am taking this room. It is for the nursery. This is my office." I said, "Well, yeah, but you have the whole house," Tiffany said, gesturing vaguely with the hand holding my confidential financial reports. "This room has the best light in the morning. The guest room is too drafty for Leo. He has sensitive lungs. Reagan, you would not want him to get sick, would you? I looked at the files in her hand. Put those down. Relax. I am just moving them to the garage. You can work in the dining room, right? You are always on your laptop anyway. The garage. She was moving my father's legacy, the work that paid for the roof over her head, into the damp, cold garage to make room for a plastic crib. Arthur appeared in the doorway behind me. He was wearing his golf vest, looking flushed and pleased with himself. Reagan, good, you are here, Arthur said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. I flinched, but he did not notice. We're getting Tiff settled in. Is it not great? The family is all under one roof again. She is dismantling my office. Arthur, I said, my eyes fixed on Tiffany. She had turned her back to me and was now hanging a tacky, bright yellow mobile from my vintage brass chandelier. It is just temporary, honey, Arthur said, his voice taking on that condescending, fatherly tone that made me want to scream. Look, Tiff has had a hard time. She needs space. A baby takes up a lot of room. You are a single woman. You do not need all this space just for Xiaoyuzing Haoling. Tuhash is greater than paperwork. Paperwork, that is what he called the career that paid for his cholesterol medication and his golf fees. I work from home 3 days a week. I said, this is my house. You do not get to repurpose rooms without asking me. Tiffany spun around, dropping the files onto the floor, papers scattered everywhere. Oh my God, are you serious right now? Her voice went up an octave. That shrill, victimized tone I remembered so well. I just escaped an abusive marriage. Reagan, I have an infant son, and you are worried about your stupid desk. Do you have any empathy at all? Or are you just totally dead inside? My mother appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. Reagan, please, do not cause a scene. Not on her first night. Just let her have the room for tonight. We can discuss it later. It is not just tonight. Mom, Tiffany said, crossing her arms. I am not moving all this stuff back. Leo needs stability. I looked at the three of them. Arthur, smug and entitled, acting as if he owned the deed. My mother, weak and terrified of conflict, willing to sacrifice me to keep the peace. And Tiffany, the invading force, using her child as a human shield to conquer territory she did not earn. I looked down at the pile of books on the floor. One of them, a rare edition of The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, lay open, its spine cracked. My father had spent 2 years looking for that book. I felt something click inside my chest. It was the sound of a lock engaging. The warmth drained out of me, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I realized then that arguing was pointless. Screaming would only make me look hysterical, and they would love that. They would love to paint me as the villain. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be patient. Fine, I said. The word hung in the air. Tiffany smirked. Arthur patted my shoulder again. That is a good girl, Arthur said. I knew you would understand. I understand perfectly. I said. I bent down and picked up the book with the broken spine. I smoothed the page, closed it gently, and held it to my chest. Welcome home, Tiffany. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them to their victory. As I walked down the hall to my bedroom, I could hear them laughing. They thought they had won. They thought I was a doormat they could walk over because I craved their approval. They were wrong. I was not retreating. I was just changing my strategy. If they wanted to play house, we would play house. But they forgot one crucial detail. I was the landlord, and landlords have keys to everything. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app and stared at the joint account I shared with my mother for household expenses. Show, do not tell. I thought to myself, I transferred $5,000 out of the household account and back into my private savings. Then I set a notification alert for any transaction over $50. Down the hall, I heard the baby start to cry. It was a sharp, piercing wail that echoed through the quiet house. It sounded like a siren. The invasion had begun. The occupation of my home was swift and absolute. Within 48 hours, the silence I cherished was replaced by the constant, droning hum of a white noise machine. It sat outside my bedroom door in the hallway, cranking out a sound that resembled a jet engine idling on a tarmac. Tiffany insisted that little Leo could not sleep without it, and therefore, neither could I. It was Wednesday morning, 3 days after the invasion. I was in the kitchen, attempting to brew a cup of coffee before my 6 o'clock commute. The house was dark, save for the blue light of the digital clock on the oven. I pressed the brew button on my Keurig. The machine gave its usual hiss and gurgle. From the living room, a voice cut through the darkness. Sao yu jing haling, ar jing hao dayu. I froze. Tiffany was sprawled on my Italian leather sofa, illuminated by the flickering light of the television. She was wrapped in one of my cashmere throws, a half-eaten bag of chips resting on her chest. You are going to wake him up, she whispered loudly. That machine is like a jackhammer. Can you not buy coffee at Starbucks or something? I stared at her. The coffee began to drip into my mug. I watched the dark liquid rise, fighting the urge to pour it onto the floor. I live here. Tiffany, I said, my voice flat. I drink coffee in my kitchen. She rolled her eyes and turned back to the television. You are so selfish. A mother needs her rest. You would not understand. You have never had to care for anyone but yourself. I took my coffee and walked away. I did not remind her that the cashmere throw she was wiping her grease-stained fingers on cost more than her first car. I did not remind her that I was the one paying for the electricity powering that television. I swallowed the rage, letting it settle in my stomach like a cold stone. That evening, the ambush was waiting for me. I arrived home to find the dining room table set with the good china, the Wedgwood set my grandmother had left me. My mother was fluttering around, lighting candles. Arthur was pouring wine, a bottle of Cabernet from my private cellar that I had been saving for a special occasion. Reagan, sit down. Sit down, Arthur said, beaming. He pulled out a chair for me. We have an idea. A wonderful idea. I sat. The air smelled of roast chicken and manipulation. We were talking today. My mother began, piling mashed potatoes onto my plate. About Leo. He is such a blessing. Reagan, a miracle. And we realized that we have not properly celebrated his arrival. Tiffany sat across from me, feeding Leo a bottle. She looked smug, like a cat that had just swallowed a canary. We want to host a sip and see, Tiffany said. It is a Southern tradition. You invite everyone over to sip champagne and see the baby. It is very high class. Arthur nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And we cannot just have it here in the backyard. It is too cold. And frankly, we want to make a statement. The Moores are back in town. We were thinking the Rolling Hills Country Club. I stopped cutting my chicken. The Rolling Hills Country Club was the most exclusive venue in Westport. The initiation fee alone was enough to buy a small house in the Midwest. That sounds expensive, I said, taking a sip of the wine Arthur had stolen from me. Arthur waved his hand dismissively. You have to spend money to make money. Reagan, it is about networking. It is about family honor. We booked the grand ballroom for the 15th of next month. My fork clattered onto my plate. You booked it? Yes, my mother said, her eyes pleading. It is going to be beautiful. White lilies everywhere. A string quartet. We invited all the neighbors, the people from your office, even the mayor. And who is paying for this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Arthur cleared his throat. He looked at the ceiling, then at his wine glass. Anywhere but at me. Well, we are a bit tied up with the liquidity of Tiffany's divorce right now. We thought, since you are doing so well, and since you are the baby's aunt, Saoyudzingho Ling, 2 hashes greater than it would be a nice gesture. A gift. How much? I asked. $15,000. Tiffany said. She did not even look up from the baby. Plus the catering. So maybe $18,000. They wanted me to burn $18,000 so Tiffany could play the wealthy socialite for an afternoon. No, I said. The room went silent. The only sound was the baby sucking on the bottle. Excuse me? Arthur asked, his face darkening. I said no. I am not paying $18,000 for a party. If you want to host it here, I will buy some balloons and order pizza. But I am not funding a gala for a 1-month-old infant. Tiffany slammed the baby bottle down on the table. Milk splattered onto the tablecloth. See, she looked at my mother. I told you. She hates me. She hates Leo. She's jealous because I have a child and she is all alone with her money. Reagan, please, my mother whispered. Just do this for us. For the family. I stood up. My appetite was gone. I am not an automated teller machine. Mother, I am your daughter. And until you learn the difference, the answer is no. I walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Tiffany sobbing and Arthur muttering about how ungrateful I was. The next morning, the consequences of my refusal were broadcast to the world. I was at my desk at work when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook. I rarely check social media, but the preview text caught my eye. Tiffany Moore tagged you in a post. I opened the app. There was a photo of Tiffany holding Leo, looking sad and weary, filtered in black and white to maximize the tragedy. The caption read, "It is so hard being a single mom when the world is against you. I just wanted to celebrate my beautiful son. But apparently, some family members care more about their bank accounts than their own flesh and blood. It breaks my heart that my sister at Reagan Vance refuses to help us welcome Leo into the world. I guess money really does change people. Please pray for us. We are all alone in this." I scrolled down to the comments. They were a cesspool of misplaced sympathy. Wow, that is disgusting. Stay strong. Mama, some people are so cold. You do not need her toxic energy. I see her driving that Audi around town. Must be nice to be rich and heartless. My hands shook, not from sadness, but from a cold, sharp rage. She was trying to destroy my reputation. She was weaponizing the community against me. I did not reply. I did not delete the tag. I simply took a screenshot and saved it to a folder on my phone named Evidence. Then, I opened my work email and forwarded a specific PDF document to my personal printer at home. I left work early that day. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet. They were likely expecting me to come home defeated. ready to open my checkbook to make the public shaming stop. I walked into the kitchen. They were all there, eating takeout sushi. Another expense charged to my card. No doubt, Arthur looked up, a smug smile playing on his lips. Rough day at the office. Reagan? I saw people are talking. Small towns. You know, word travels fast. He thought he had me. He thought shame was a lever he could pull to open my wallet. I sat down at the head of the table. I placed a yellow manila envelope on the placemat in front of me. I saw the post. Tiffany, I said. Tiffany smirked. I just spoke my truth. If you do not like it, maybe you should be a better sister. I nodded slowly. You are right. We should clear the air. We should be totally transparent about money. I slid the envelope across the table toward Arthur. What is this? Arthur asked, eyeing the package suspiciously. Is it the check for the party? Open it, I said. Arthur hesitated, then tore open the flap. He pulled out a stack of stapled papers. As he read the first page, the color drained from his face. His hands began to tremble. Tiffany leaned over. What is it, Dad? It was a bank statement, but not mine. It was a record of a wire transfer from Arthur's secret account, an account he thought I did not know about. That is a receipt, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. It shows a transfer of $12,000 made 3 months ago. The recipient is the Golden Nugget Casino in Atlantic City. My mother gasped, Arthur? But that is not the interesting part. I continued, locking eyes with Tiffany. The debt was not Arthur's. It was listed under the name of your ex-husband. Tiffany, Arthur paid off your husband's gambling debts to stop the loan sharks from breaking his legs. And he did it with the money he was supposed to be saving for Mom's retirement. Tiffany went pale. She looked at Arthur, then at me. How did you get this? I am a chief financial officer. Tiffany, I find money. That is what I do. I stood up and leaned over the table. There will be no party at the country club. I said, you will delete that Facebook post within 5 minutes, or I will post these documents in the comments section. I will let all those sympathetic neighbors know that while you were crying poverty, your father was enabling your husband's gambling addiction with my mother's future. I looked at Arthur. He was slumped in his chair, unable to meet his wife's horrified gaze. Enjoy the sushi, I said. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I did not look back. Behind me, the silence was heavy and suffocating. The first crack had appeared in their united front, and I had been the one to swing the hammer. The war in my house shifted from open artillery to guerrilla tactics. After the dinner table confrontation regarding the casino debt, the shouting stopped. The demands for money ceased. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the estate, thicker than the morning fog that rolled off the Long Island Sound. But in that silence, things began to move. It started with the small things. My favorite lipstick, a specific shade of crimson from Tom Ford, vanished from my vanity. I searched the drawers, checked my purse, and even felt the lining of my coat pockets. It was gone. 2 days later, I found it in the guest bathroom trash can, smashed into a pulp, the gold casing twisted and broken. When I asked Tiffany about it, she just shrugged, bouncing Leo on her hip, and said she thought it was old and expired. Then, it was my cashmere scarf. Then, a pair of diamond stud earrings my father had given me for my 25th birthday. I remember standing in my walk-in closet, staring at the empty velvet slot in my jewelry box. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew exactly where I had put them. I was meticulous. My life was a series of spreadsheets and organized compartments. I did not misplace diamonds. I walked downstairs. It was Saturday morning. The house smelled of bacon and the cloying scent of baby powder. Arthur was reading the newspaper, and my mother was feeding Leo a bottle while Tiffany scrolled on her phone. "Where are my earrings?" I asked. My voice was tight, vibrating with suppressed anger. Tiffany did not look up. "What earrings?" "The diamond studs, the ones Dad gave me. They are gone." My mother looked up, her eyes wide and innocent. "Oh, Reagan, are you sure you did not leave them at the office? You know how you take them off when you are on the phone." "I never take them off at the office," I said. "Someone took them." Arthur lowered his newspaper. "That is a serious accusation." "Reagan, are you saying we are thieves? In our own home?" "I am saying they were in my box yesterday, and now they are gone. And Tiffany was in my room this morning. I saw her coming out when I was in the shower." Tiffany gasped, a theatrical, over-the-heart gesture. "I was looking for the diaper genie. I thought you had extra bags. I did not touch your precious jewelry." "God, you are so paranoid. You are stressed." "Honey," my mother chimed in, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet concern. "You have been working so late. You are forgetting things. Remember last week when you thought you lost your car keys and they were in your coat pocket? I did not lose them. You moved them," I said. My mother exchanged a look with Arthur, a look of pity, a look that said, "She is losing it." "Reagan, listen to yourself," Arthur said softly. "You are sounding irrational. Maybe you should see someone. Stress can do terrible things to a woman's mind. Your aunt had early onset dementia. You know, it runs in the family." I froze. The air in the kitchen seemed to drop 10 degrees. They were not just stealing from me. They were rewriting my reality. They were planting seeds of doubt in my own mind, watering them with lies, hoping I would crack. I looked at their faces, the united front of the parasite class. They wanted me to believe I was crazy, so that when I eventually snapped, they could point and say, "We told you so." I did not scream. I did not throw the coffee mug that was burning my hand. I simply nodded. "Maybe you are right," I said. "Maybe I am just tired." I watched a small, triumphant smile flicker across Tiffany's lips. She thought she had broken me. She thought I was retreating. But I was not retreating. I was gathering intelligence. That afternoon, I told them I was going to the spa to relax. Instead, I drove 3 towns over to a specialty electronics store in Stamford. I did not want a paper trail coming to the house. I paid in cash. I bought 4 cameras. These were not the bulky security cameras that mount on the wall. These were pinhole cameras, high definition, disguised as everyday objects. One was hidden inside the face of a digital alarm clock. Another was built into a smoke detector housing. The third was inside a USB wall charger. The fourth was the smallest, hidden inside the spine of a fake hardcover book. I returned home when the house was empty. Arthur and my mother had taken Tiffany and the baby to the park to keep up appearances. I had 45 minutes. I worked with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. I replaced the alarm clock on my nightstand. I swapped the smoke detector in the hallway. I plugged the charger into the kitchen outlet, positioning it so it faced the refrigerator and the island. I placed the book on the shelf in the living room, angled toward the liquor cabinet and my father's display case. I connected them to a secure, encrypted cloud server that only I could access. I set up the app on my phone, burying it inside a folder of boring financial calculators. When they came home, I was sitting on the couch reading a magazine. "Did you have a nice time?" my mother asked. "Lovely." I said, "I feel much better. My mind is much clearer now." For the next 3 days, I went to work, sat in my corner office, and instead of analyzing market trends, I analyzed the behavior of the people living in my house. I watched the live feed on my iPad, my headphones canceling out the noise of the corporate world. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was not just the theft. The theft was almost mundane. I watched Tiffany enter my bedroom the moment I left for work. She did not just look for valuables. She went through my underwear drawer. She tried on my clothes, parading in front of my mirror, posing and making faces, mocking me. I saw her take a bottle of my expensive perfume, $300 an ounce, and spray it into the air like it was cheap air freshener, just to waste it. I saw Arthur go into my private wine cellar. He did not just take a bottle. He took 3. He uncorked one, drank straight from the bottle, wiped his mouth with his sleeve, and then poured the rest down the sink. It was not about the wine. It was about taking something that was mine and destroying it. But the breaking point came on Thursday. I was in a meeting with the board of directors when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the kitchen camera. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, another buzz, then another. I excused myself from the meeting, citing a family emergency. I went to the bathroom, locked the stall door, and opened the app. I scrolled back to the timestamp from 10 minutes ago. On the small screen, I saw Tiffany standing in my kitchen. She was holding the Tupperware container of pasta I had prepared for my dinner that night. I had made it specifically because I was training for a marathon and needed the carbs. It was a simple bolognese sauce, my father's recipe. Tiffany opened the lid. She looked around, checking the hallway to make sure no one was coming. She did not know the USB charger in the wall was recording her every move in 4K resolution. She took a fork and ate a mouthful. Then, she made a face. She looked at the container with pure, unadulterated malice. I watched, holding my breath, as she leaned over the container. She gathered saliva in her mouth, a thick, grotesque amount, and then she spit. She spit directly into my food. She did not stop there. She stirred it around with the fork, mixing her filth into the sauce. Then she opened the refrigerator and took out the carton of orange juice. My orange juice. She took a sip, gargled it in her throat, and spit it back into the carton. She placed everything back in the fridge, wiped the counter, and smiled. It was a smile of pure satisfaction, a smile that said she enjoyed this. She enjoyed defiling my life. I sat on the toilet lid in the corporate bathroom, my hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. It was not just about entitlement. It was not just about money or a room for the baby. This was hatred, deep, festering, pathological hatred. She wanted to make me sick. She wanted to humiliate me in the most primal way possible. And my mother? I rewound the footage further. 20 minutes earlier, my mother had been in the kitchen. She had watched Tiffany take my dry cleaning, my silk blouses, out of the bag and throw them on the floor where the dog sleeps. My mother had watched, and she had said nothing. She had simply picked up a dish towel and wiped the counter, enabling the abuse, complicit in the destruction of her own daughter. I closed the app. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it was not a tear of sadness. It was the last drop of my humanity leaving my body. I stood up and flushed the toilet. I washed my hands, scrubbing them until the skin was raw and red. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different. The hesitation was gone. The desire for family approval was dead, drowned in a Tupperware container of ruined pasta. I walked back into the boardroom. My boss looked up. "Is everything all right, Reagan?" he asked. I sat down and opened my laptop. I looked him dead in the eye. "Everything is perfect," I said. "I just realized I have been negotiating with the wrong strategy." That night, I went home. I walked into the kitchen. Tiffany was feeding Leo. Arthur was drinking a beer. My mother was stirring a pot of soup. "Reagan, you are just in time for dinner," my mother chirped. I walked to the fridge. I opened it and took out the pasta and the orange juice. "What are you doing?" Tiffany asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "I am not hungry," I said. "I think I will order out." I walked to the trash can and dumped the pasta. Then I poured the orange juice down the drain. The thick, orange liquid swirled away, taking their secrets with it. "Why would you waste good food?" Arthur grumbled. I turned to them. I smiled. It was the coldest smile I had ever worn. "I just lost my appetite," I said. "I think the food has gone bad. It smells. Haling. 2 hash is greater than contaminated." Tiffany's eyes flickered. For a split second, I saw fear. She knew that I knew, or at least, she suspected. I walked upstairs to my room, my temporary fortress. I locked the door. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I transferred the video files from the cloud to 3 separate hard drives. I encrypted them. I named the folder the nuclear option. Then, I opened a new browser window. I searched for lawyers specializing in eviction and fraud. I was not just going to kick them out. I was going to destroy them. I was going to wait until the perfect moment, until they felt safe, until they thought they had won everything. And then, I was going to play the movie of their lives on a giant screen and watch them burn. The discovery was made. The evidence was secured. Now, the trap had to be set. The garage was my father's chapel. It was not a place for storage. It was a gallery. The centerpiece was his pride and joy, a 1968 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL Pagoda. It was painted a deep, midnight blue. The chrome bumpers polished to a mirror shine that could reflect the sins of anyone who dared to look too closely. When he died, he left the car to me, not because I was a car enthusiast, but because he knew I was the only one who would respect it. I kept it under a custom-fitted silk cover, driving it only on dry Sundays to keep the engine lubricated. It was the one thing in the house that Tiffany had not yet touched. That changed on a Friday morning. The air in the kitchen was thick with the smell of burnt toast and tension. I was filling my travel mug, preparing for the sanctuary of my office, when Tiffany slid into the room. She was wearing a bathrobe that was too short, holding Leo against her shoulder like a shield. "Reagan, I need a favor," she said. It was not a question. It was a demand wrapped in a tone of exhaustively rehearsed victimhood. I did not turn around. I focused on screwing the lid onto my coffee cup. "What is it?" "Tiffany, my car would not start this morning," she said. "The starter is dead. I have to take Leo to the pediatrician in an hour. It is his 1-month checkup. It is vital." I checked my watch. Uber exists. "Tiffany, or you can ask Arthur. Dad is golfing," she said quickly. "And I am not putting a newborn in an Uber with some stranger who probably has the flu. It is unsafe. I need to borrow the Mercedes." I stopped. I turned slowly to face her. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive. in its sheer lack of self-awareness. "You want to drive the pagoda?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "It is just a car." "Reagan," she scoffed, shifting the baby. "It is safer than my piece of junk. It has a solid frame. I need something safe for my son. Unless you want us to crash." She was doing it again. The weaponization of the infant. If I said no, I was voting for a car crash. If I said yes, I was handing the keys of a 6-figure vintage vehicle to a woman who had totaled 3 cars in high school. "The answer is no," I said. "That car is not a daily driver. It does not even have ISOFIX latches for a car seat. It is a collector's item." Tiffany's face crumpled into a mask of rage. "You are unbelievable. It is just metal and rubber. This is a human life. You care more about your dead dad's toy than your own nephew." "I care about boundaries," I said, "and you have none. Call a car service. I will pay for the premium SUV option, but you are not touching the Mercedes." I walked past her, grabbed the keys to the Mercedes from the hook by the door, and dropped them into my purse. I would not leave them in the house. Not anymore. As I backed my Audi out of the driveway, I saw her standing in the window, watching me. She was not crying. She was staring with eyes that looked like 2 burnt holes in a sheet. I spent the day at work in a fog of anxiety. My productivity was non-existent. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I checked the hidden camera feeds. But the garage did not have a camera yet, an oversight I now bitterly regretted. The house cameras showed nothing unusual. Arthur came home. My mother made lunch. Tiffany paced the living room, talking angrily on the phone. I drove home at 5 o'clock. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. When I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. The garage door was open. I parked the Audi and ran. My heels clicked frantically on the asphalt. I stopped at the threshold of the garage and gasped. The sound that escaped my throat was not a scream. It was the sound of something breaking inside my chest. The silk cover had been ripped off the Mercedes and thrown into a corner. Tangled and dirty, the car sat there, exposed, and on the passenger side door, running from the front fender all the way to the rear tail light, was a deep, jagged gouge. It cut through the clear coat, through the midnight blue paint, down to the white primer and bare metal. It was not an accident. It was a signature. I walked closer. My fingers hovered over the wound in the metal. The violence of it made me nauseous. "Oh, thank God you are home." I spun around. Tiffany was standing in the doorway, connecting the garage to the house. She was holding a bulky plastic stroller. She looked flustered, her eyes wide with fake panic. "I had a little accident," she said, breathless. "I was trying to get the stroller past the car to get to the recycling bin. It is so tight in here with 2 cars. The metal latch on the side caught the door. I feel terrible." I looked at the scratch. It was deep. It required force. A stroller grazing a car does not gouge metal like that. This was done with a key, or a screwdriver, and it was done with hate. "You did this on purpose," I whispered. "What? No," Tiffany shrieked, clutching her chest. "How can you say that? It was an accident. I told you, it is too crowded in here. If you had just let me drive it, it would have been out of the garage and this would not have happened." My mother and Arthur appeared behind her, drawn by the shouting. "What is going on?" Arthur asked. He looked at the car and winced. "Ouch, that is a nasty one. She keyed it," I said, my voice shaking. "She keyed my father's car because I told her no." "Reagan, stop it. my mother yelled. She stepped in front of Tiffany, shielding her. It was an accident. Look at her. She is shaking. Why do you always assume the worst of your sister? Because she is a sociopath? Mother, I shouted. Arthur stepped forward, raising his hands. Okay, everybody calm down. It is just paint. We can buff it out. I know a guy who does bodywork cheap. We will fix it. Do not make this into a federal case. Just paint. He spit on my father's memory and called it just paint. I looked at them, the three of them, standing together, the wall of dysfunction. They expected me to cry. They expected me to yell for an hour and then pay for the repairs myself while they ate dinner. They expected the cycle to continue. I reached into my purse. What are you doing? Tiffany asked, her voice faltering slightly. I pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and dialed 3 digits. 911. Reagan. Put the phone down, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. Do not do this. Operator, I said into the phone. My eyes locked on Tiffany's pale face. I would like to report an act of vandalism at my residence. Yes, willful destruction of property. The value of the damage exceeds $5,000. I would like an officer to come and file a report. Reagan, my mother screamed. She lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. Are you insane? Tiffany hissed. You are calling the cops on family? Over a car? I am calling the police on a criminal, I said calmly to Tiffany, while the operator asked for my address. I gave the address. I hung up. The silence in the garage was absolute. The only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine and the heavy breathing of 3 people who realized the rules of engagement had just changed. Get out, Arthur said. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You ungrateful, heartless bitch. You would send your sister to jail? With a newborn baby? I looked at the scratch on the car. It looked like a scar. She did that to herself. Arthur, I said, just like she did this to the car. I walked out of the garage and stood on the driveway to wait for the police cruiser. I could hear my mother inside the house, wailing. I could hear Arthur shouting. I stood alone in the cold evening air, wrapping my coat tighter around myself. When the police arrived, the neighbors came out to their porches. They watched as the officer took photos of the car. They watched as he interviewed Tiffany, who sobbed hysterically and played the exhausted mother card. They watched as my mother screamed at me from the front door, calling me a monster. I filed the report. I insisted on pressing charges. The officer looked uncomfortable. He tried to mediate, suggesting it was a civil matter, but I cited the statute for criminal mischief. I was relentless. I was cold. That night, the house was a war zone. They retreated to the other side of the house, barricading themselves in the living room. I went to my room and locked the door. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I was completely isolated. My mother would never forgive me. Arthur would spend the rest of his life trying to ruin me. Tiffany would escalate her attacks. But as I closed my eyes, I did not feel fear. I felt the cold, hard weight of clarity. The family I thought I had was dead. These were strangers, and strangers who destroy your property do not get to live in your house. I pulled up the hidden camera app on my phone. I watched the feed from the living room. Arthur was pacing, holding a glass of scotch. Tiffany was on the phone with someone, gesturing wildly. I zoomed in on Arthur. He was holding a stack of papers, legal papers. I saw the logo of a bank at the top. I sat up. I took a screenshot. The car was just a distraction. The real war was about the roof over my head, and if they wanted to fight dirty, I was about to show them what a scorched earth policy really looked like. The mail arrived at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was usually a mundane event, a collection of catalogs and utility bills that I paid automatically without looking at the totals. But on this particular Tuesday, I was home early. The hostility in the house had become a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it impossible to breathe, let alone work. I had come home to pack a bag. I was considering staying at a hotel in Greenwich, just to escape the sound of Tiffany's voice and the sight of my mother's apologetic, cowardly eyes. I picked up the stack of envelopes from the floor of the foyer. Most of it was junk, but one envelope caught my eye. It was thick, heavy, and stamped with the logo of Bridgeport Savings and Loan. It was addressed to Arthur Moore and Susan Vance. I froze. My mother and Arthur did not bank with Bridgeport. I handled their finances. I managed their retirement accounts. I knew every dime that came in and went out. I walked into the kitchen. The house was empty. They were out spending money they did not have, likely buying more unnecessary accessories for the baby. I boiled a kettle of water. I did not make tea. Instead, I held the envelope over the steam, carefully working the adhesive loose. It was a federal crime to open someone else's mail. At that moment, I did not care. The law had failed to protect my car. I doubted it would protect my inheritance. The flap gave way. I pulled out the documents. My hands began to shake, but not from fear. It was a tremor of pure, unadulterated shock. It was a loan approval, a home equity line of credit. They were leveraging the house, my house, the house my father's life insurance had paid for, to take out a loan of $60,000. I scanned the terms. The interest rate was predatory. The repayment schedule was aggressive, and the stated purpose of the loan was small business investment. I sat down on the cold tile floor of the kitchen, the papers crinkling in my grip. They were selling the roof over my head to fund Tiffany. They were going to gamble away my father's legacy on a spa or a boutique or whatever delusion Tiffany was currently entertaining. And my mother, the woman who had sworn to protect me, had co-signed. Her signature was right there at the bottom of the application. Shaky but legible. She had chosen for 32 years. I had told myself that my mother was just weak. I told myself that she loved me, but she was easily manipulated by strong men like Arthur. I made excuses for her silence. I paid her bills. I bought her clothes. I tried to buy the love she seemed incapable of giving freely. But looking at that signature, the excuses disintegrated. She was not weak. She was complicit. She was willing to bankrupt me to make Tiffany happy. She was willing to risk our home so that her husband's daughter could play pretend. I felt something die inside of me. It was a quiet death. The part of me that was a daughter. The part that craved approval. The part that wanted to be a good girl. It simply ceased to exist. I stood up. I walked to the sink and poured a glass of cold water. I drank it in one long swallow. When I lowered the glass, the woman reflected in the window was no longer Reagan the victim. She was Reagan the chief financial officer. She was Reagan the shark. I was done crying. I was done shouting. It was time to negotiate. I carefully resealed the envelope with a glue stick and placed it back on the counter, exactly where I had found it. Then, I went to my study. I opened my laptop and drafted a document. It took me 2 hours. I used legal templates I had acquired from the corporate attorneys at my firm. I adjusted the clauses. I tightened the noose. When I heard their car pull into the driveway, I was ready. Dinner was a silent affair. The tension from the police incident regarding the car was still thick in the air. Tiffany refused to look at me, feeding Leo with aggressive, jerky movements. Arthur ate his pot roast with his head down. I cleared my throat. I want to apologize, I said. 3 heads snapped up. They looked at me as if I had started speaking a foreign language. Excuse me? Arthur asked, narrowing his eyes. I overreacted about the car. I lied. My voice was smooth, measured, perfect. I was tired. I was stressed about work. I know it was an accident. I called the precinct this afternoon and dropped the charges. My mother let out a long, shuddering breath. Oh, Reagan. Oh, thank God. I knew you would come to your senses. We are family. We forgive each other. Tiffany eyed me suspiciously. So, you are not going to sue me? No, I said. In fact, I want to make it up to you. I reached under the table and pulled out a leather portfolio. I placed it next to the butter dish. I know things have been difficult. I continued, watching Arthur's eyes track the folder. And I know you are looking for capital to start your own business. Tiffany, I want to help. Tiffany's jaw dropped. You do? Arthur shifted in his seat. He exchanged a nervous glance with my mother. They were thinking about the bank loan sitting on the kitchen counter. They were wondering if I knew. I continued, pressing my advantage. I know how hard it is to get a loan right now. The interest rates are terrible, and using the house as collateral is risky. If you miss a payment, the bank takes the house. I cannot let you do that to Mom. Arthur turned pale. How did you? Sao Jing Hao Ling. R. Jing Hao Dayu. I am a financial officer. Arthur, I know how these things work. I opened the portfolio. Inside was a check for $75,000. It was more than the bank was offering. It was enough to make them drool. I am willing to invest $75,000 in Tiffany's future. I said, consider it seed money. You can open your spa. You can get an apartment. You can start your life. Tiffany reached for the check, her fingers twitching. 75,000? Seriously? There is a condition, I said, pulling the check back slightly. It is a loan, not a gift. I need to protect my assets. It is just a formality, a standard promissory note. No interest for the first year. No interest? Arthur repeated, his greed overriding his caution. That is, Sao Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than that is very generous. Reagan, it is family, I said, smiling. A cold, dead smile that did not reach my eyes. I pushed the contract toward them. It was 5 pages long, single-spaced. I knew they would not read it. They never read anything. They only saw the number on the check. If they had read it, they would have seen Clause 14b. It stated that the loan was a demand note, meaning the lender could demand full repayment at any time, with only 7 days' notice. If they had read Clause 16c, they would have seen that the loan was personally guaranteed by Arthur Moore, and the collateral listed was not the business, but his entire pension fund and his 50% equity stake in any future inheritance. If they had read it, they would have run, but they did not read it. Tiffany was already mentally spending the money. Arthur was relieved he did not have to deal with the bank. My mother was just happy we were not yelling. Where do we sign? Tiffany asked, grabbing a pen. Right there, I said, pointing to the line. And Arthur, you need to sign as the guarantor, just to keep it legal. Arthur laughed, a nervous, jovial sound. Of course, anything for my girls. He signed his name. He signed away his retirement. He signed away his safety. I watched the ink dry. It looked like blood turning black. Tiffany snatched the check. Oh my God. This is amazing. I am going to look at retail spaces tomorrow. Reagan, you are actually Haling too? Okay. Maybe you are not a robot after all. I took the contract and slid it back into my portfolio. I am glad I could help, I said. I stood up. I felt light. The burden of anger was gone, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. I had them. They were living in my house, eating my food, and now they were legally bound to my will. I am going to turn in early, I said. I have a lot of work to do. I walked out of the dining room. As I climbed the stairs, I heard them celebrating. I heard champagne corks popping. I heard them toasting to their good fortune. They were toasting to their own funeral. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I walked to the safe in my closet and placed the contract inside. I spun the dial. Haling. 2. Click. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for them to trip the wire. And I knew Tiffany. She would trip it. She would spend that money on clothes and cars and trips. And when the business failed to materialize, I would call in the loan. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark lawn. My reflection in the glass looked different tonight. Harder, sharper. I was no longer the victim of this story. I was the author of their demise. And I was going to write a tragedy so profound they would never recover. The ink on the predatory loan agreement was barely dry before Tiffany began to spend. She did not look for retail space for her alleged spa business. She did not consult with contractors or look at business plans. Instead, she turned my foyer into a shipping and receiving department for luxury department stores. Every day, the delivery trucks arrived. Brown boxes with the smiling arrow logo. White boxes from Saks Fifth Avenue. Heavy garment bags from Neiman Marcus. They piled up against the wainscoting. A barricade of cardboard and greed. Tiffany walked through the house with a new strut, wearing $400 sunglasses indoors, cooing at Leo that mommy was finally getting what she deserved. I watched it all. I did not say a word. I did not remind her that the $75,000 was a loan, not a lottery win. I simply logged every package into a spreadsheet, attaching the time-stamped video clips from the hallway camera as proof of misuse of funds. But while Tiffany was distracted by her consumerist frenzy, I was pulling at a loose thread I had discovered weeks ago. I sat in a booth at the back of a diner in Stamford, 10 miles away from the prying eyes of Westport. Across from me sat Miller, a private investigator I had hired through my corporate attorney. Miller was a man who looked like he had been gray since birth, blending into the upholstery of the booth. He slid a thick manila envelope across the Formica table. It was heavy. "You were right to be suspicious," Miller said, his voice a low gravel. I looked into the ex-husband, Kyle Moore. Nice guy. Works at a mechanic shop in New Jersey. "And?" I asked, my hand resting on the envelope. "And he had a motorcycle accident 4 years ago," Miller said. "He took a bad spill on the turnpike, shattered his pelvis. The doctors put him back together, but there was some permanent damage." He tapped the envelope. "He is sterile. Reagan, medically confirmed. He has been shooting blanks since 2021. The noise of the diner, the clattering of silverware, the hiss of the espresso machine faded into a dull roar. So the baby, I said, is not his." Miller finished. "And here is the kicker. Kyle knows it. That is why they got divorced. It was not abuse. It was infidelity. He caught her. She spun the abuse narrative to gain sympathy from your family and to get out of town before the truth spread. I opened the folder. There were copies of medical records, court transcripts from the divorce proceedings that Tiffany had conveniently sealed, and a timeline of her whereabouts 9 months prior to Leo's birth. She was working as a temporary executive assistant at Sterling Enterprises. I read aloud. Harrison Sterling, Miller said, real estate mogul, worth about $200 million. Married for 30 years, 3 grown kids, a pillar of the community. I looked at the photo of Harrison Sterling clipped to the file. He was a handsome man in his 60s, with silver hair and a smile that looked like it cost $10,000. He was also a member of the same country club my father had belonged to. I remembered something, a memory from 3 months ago. Before Tiffany moved in, I had seen her name on a guest list for a charity gala hosted by the Sterlings. She had not just been an assistant. She had been hunting. She is blackmailing him, I whispered. Miller nodded. That is my working theory. She gets pregnant. She keeps the baby. She waits until the kid is old enough to prove paternity. Then she drops the bomb on Sterling. Pay up, or I destroy your marriage and your reputation. It was diabolical. It was smart. And it was disgusting. She was using an innocent child as a bargaining chip in a high-stakes extortion scheme, while simultaneously leeching off my family to fund her lifestyle until the big payout came. I need proof. I said, absolute, biological proof. I need a sample from the kid. Miller said, I already managed to get a coffee cup from Sterling's trash at his office. I have his DNA. I just need the boys. I can get it, I said. That evening, I returned home with a mission. The house was quiet for once. Tiffany was out celebrating with friends she had suddenly reconnected with now that she had money. Arthur and my mother were asleep. I crept into the nursery. The room smelled of lavender and milk. Leo was asleep in the crib, his small chest rising and falling. He was innocent in all of this. He was just a pawn in his mother's twisted game. I reached into the crib, gently, careful not to wake him. I plucked a used pacifier that had fallen onto the mattress. I placed it into a sterile plastic bag I had brought from the lab. I looked at him one last time. I am sorry, I thought, but the truth has to come out. I mailed the sample to Miller the next morning. 3 days later, the tragedy struck, but it did not come in the form of a DNA result. It came on 4 legs. I arrived home on Thursday evening. A nor'easter was blowing in from the coast. The wind was howling, rattling the window panes, and the temperature had dropped to single digits. Freezing rain lashed against the windshield of my Audi. I walked into the house, shaking off the cold. Barnaby, I called out. Usually, my 12-year-old golden retriever would come trotting to the door, his tail wagging slowly, greeting me with a soft woof. He was the one living thing in this house that loved me unconditionally. He was my father's dog. There was no sound. I walked into the kitchen. Tiffany was sitting at the counter, painting her nails a bright blood red. She did not look up. Where is the dog? I asked. Tiffany blew on her nails. Oh, the beast? I put him out. I froze. You what? I put him out back, she said casually. He was shedding everywhere. Leo was sneezing. I think the baby is allergic to dander. I cannot have dog hair floating around my son. It is unhygienic. I looked at the window. The ice was hammering against the glass. It was 5 degrees outside. Barnaby was 12. He had arthritis. He could barely walk down the stairs, let alone survive a blizzard. How long ago? I asked. My voice was a whisper, strangled by panic. I do not know, she shrugged. A few hours? Maybe 3? 3 hours. I dropped my purse on the floor. I did not scream at her. I did not waste a single second on her. I turned and ran to the back door. I threw it open. The wind hit me like a physical blow, screaming into the kitchen, bringing snow and ice with it. Barnaby, I screamed into the dark. I ran out into the yard. I was wearing a wool coat and heels, slipping on the frozen grass. The yard was pitch black. Barnaby, I found him under the deck. He had curled himself into a tight ball, trying to find shelter from the biting wind. He was covered in a layer of frost. I fell to my knees in the mud and ice. I touched him. He was cold, so cold. He lifted his head weakly and looked at me, his eyes clouded and confused. He gave a small, pitiful whimper. Oh, God, Barnaby, I am so sorry. I tried to lift him. He was heavy, 70 pounds of dead weight. I gathered him into my arms, ignoring the mud ruining my coat, ignoring the freezing rain soaking my hair. I heaved him up, my muscles screaming, and staggered back toward the house. I kicked the door open. Tiffany looked up, startled by the intrusion of the storm. "Do not bring that wet dog in here," she shrieked. I just had the carpets cleaned. I walked past her. I did not look at her. If I had looked at her in that moment, I would have killed her. I would have put my hands around her throat and squeezed until the light went out. I carried Barnaby to my car. I laid him in the back seat. I drove to the emergency vet clinic, speeding through red lights, tears streaming down my face for the first time in years. I sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. My clothes were drying on my body, stiff with mud. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. The vet came out at midnight. "He is stable," she said softly, "but it is bad. Reagan. He has severe hypothermia and the beginning of pneumonia. At his age, Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than it is going to be a hard fight." Why was he outside in this weather? I could not speak. I just nodded, signing the credit card slip for $3,000 without even looking at the total. I drove home alone. The house was dark. They were all asleep. They were warm in their beds, dreaming of the money they had stolen from me. I walked into the house. I went upstairs to my study. I did not turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, staring at the glowing red light of the smoke detector, the hidden camera. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Miller. Subject: DNA results. Match confirmed. I opened the attachment. The probability of paternity between Harrison Sterling and baby Leo was 99.9%. I had the smoking gun. I had the financial noose around their necks. But as I sat there, smelling the lingering scent of wet dog on my coat, I realized that financial ruin was not enough. Prison was not enough. Tiffany had tried to kill the only thing I had left of my father. She had looked at a helpless, old animal and decided his life was worth less than her clean carpets. I closed my laptop. A darkness settled over me, heavier and colder than the storm outside. The Reagan who wanted justice was gone. The Reagan who wanted revenge. Pure, biblical, scorching revenge had taken her place. I walked to the window and looked out at the frozen yard where my dog had almost died. "You want a war, Tiffany?" I whispered to the empty room. I touched the cold glass. "I am going to burn your world to the ground, and I am going to watch you smile while I do it." The house felt like a bomb site in the split second before detonation. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, pressurized, waiting for a spark. Barnaby was still at the vet, fighting for every breath in an oxygen tent. I had not slept in 36 hours. My eyes burned, but my mind was crystal clear. It was Friday night. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world encased in ice. I sat in my bedroom, monitoring the feeds. I knew Tiffany's pattern. She would start drinking the moment Leo went down for the night. She preferred vodka, cheap, burning vodka mixed with whatever sugary soda was in the fridge. Tonight, she was celebrating. I had heard her on the phone earlier, bragging to a friend that she had finally broken the bitch and that the house was basically hers. At 11 o'clock, the lights in the hallway went out. Arthur and my mother had retired to their room. At 11:30, Tiffany emerged from her room. She was wearing a silk robe she had stolen from my closet. She swayed slightly as she walked down the hall, a tumbler in her hand. I watched on the screen as she stopped in front of my door. She pressed her ear against the wood. I held my breath, sitting perfectly still in the darkness of my room, satisfied that I was asleep. She giggled, a low, malicious sound, and headed downstairs to the kitchen. I switched the camera feed to the kitchen. She was rummaging through the cabinets. She pulled out a bottle of bleach. No, that was too obvious. She put it back. She reached into the back of the pantry and pulled out a small, amber prescription bottle. I zoomed in. It was my mother's prescription for lorazepam, a strong sedative used for anxiety. Tiffany opened the bottle and shook 3 pills into her hand. Then 3 more. She crushed them on the counter using the bottom of a heavy glass. Grinding them into a fine white powder, she opened the fridge and took out the pitcher of filtered water I kept on the top shelf. It was the water I drank every morning before my run. She stirred the powder into the water, watching it dissolve until it was invisible. Sleep tight, big sister, she whispered to the empty room. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. She was not just trying to annoy me or steal from me. She was drugging me. I watched her put the pitcher back. Then, she poured herself another drink and stumbled back upstairs. I waited 10 minutes. Then, I moved. I slipped out of my room and went downstairs. I took the pitcher from the fridge. I poured the tainted water into the potted ficus plant in the corner of the dining room. Then, I refilled the pitcher with fresh tap water and put it back. I went back upstairs, unlocked my door, and left it slightly ajar. I turned on the bedside lamp, dimmed low. I got into bed, fully dressed under the covers, and waited. At 2 in the morning, the door creaked open. Tiffany stood in the doorway. She was drunk. Her eyes were glassy, her hair a mess. She was holding a baby monitor in one hand and her empty glass in the other. Reagan? She slurred. I did not move. I lay still, regulating my breathing to mimic deep sleep. She stumbled into the room. She walked to the side of the bed and looked down at me. Look at you, she muttered, swaying. Miss Perfect, Miss Chief Executive Officer, you think you are so much better than me, do you not? She leaned closer, her breath smelling of alcohol and resentment. You have everything, she hissed. You have the money, you have the car, you have the house, and what do I have? Nothing. I have a screaming kid and a dad who is a loser. She reached out and touched the framed photo of my father on the nightstand. He hated you. You know, she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Dad told me. He said your father only cared about his books and his precious car. He did not care about you. That is why he died. He wanted to get away from you. The rage inside me flared, white hot. but I forced my muscles to remain loose. Let her talk. I told myself, let the camera record every word. Tiffany picked up the photo frame. I ripped up his picture. She confessed, giggling, that time when you were 12? You cried for a week. You thought the dog did it. It was me. I wanted to see you cry. You look so ugly when you cry. She set the frame down. Hard. The glass cracked. And tomorrow. 小玉静好令. 2# is greater than she swayed. Grabbing the bedpost for support. Tomorrow. You are going to have a little accident. You are going to be so sleepy. Reagan, you are going to fall down the stairs. Or maybe you will drop Leo. Yeah, that is better. You will drop the baby. And then Child Protective Services will come. And the police will come. And they will see that you are unstable. You are a danger to yourself and others. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. And then I will get power of attorney. I will be your guardian. I will control the money. And I will send you to a nice, quiet, padded room where you can rot. She straightened up, looking proud of her plan. Good night, sister. She turned and stumbled out of the room, leaving the door open. I opened my eyes. I looked directly at the alarm clock camera. Did you get that? I whispered. I sat up. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins like ice water. She had confessed to past vandalism. She had confessed to a plot to drug me, frame me for child endangerment, and have me committed to seize my assets. It was not just malice. It was a calculated, criminal conspiracy. I did not go back to sleep. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I uploaded the footage to the cloud. I emailed a copy to Miller. I emailed a copy to my lawyer. Then I waited for the sun to rise. Morning came with a gray, lifeless light. I heard the house waking up, the baby crying, the coffee maker gurgling. I stayed in bed until 9 o'clock. I needed them to think the drugs were working. At 9:30, Tiffany came back into my room. She was holding Leo. Reagan? She called out, her voice feigning concern. Are you okay? You are sleeping late. I groaned and sat up, rubbing my eyes. I pretended to be groggy. My head, 小玉静好令. 2, I muttered. I feel dizzy. Tiffany's eyes lit up. She turned to the hallway. Mom, Dad, come here. Something is wrong with Reagan. My mother and Arthur came rushing in. What is it? What happened? My mother asked. She is acting weird, Tiffany said, clutching Leo tightly. She is slurring her words. Look at her eyes. She looks high. High? Arthur asked, stepping closer. Reagan, have you taken something? I, 小玉静好令. I drank some water. I stammered, playing the part. I feel, 小玉静好令. 2# is greater than heavy. She is on drugs, Tiffany shrieked. I knew it. I found pills in her bathroom trash last week. She is an addict. It was the signal. The performance had begun. She is dangerous, Tiffany yelled, backing away. She tried to grab Leo earlier. She almost dropped him. That is a lie, I said, my voice gaining strength. Do not you come near me, Tiffany screamed. She pinched Leo's leg. Hard. The baby let out a piercing wail. She hurt him. She hurt the baby. Mom, call 911. She is having a psychotic break. My mother looked terrified. Arthur looked calculating. He saw an opportunity. Reagan, you need help? Arthur said, reaching for his phone. I am calling the paramedics and the police. We cannot have this in the house. Do it, Tiffany yelled. Get her out of here before she kills us all. She grabbed a heavy glass vase from the dresser and threw it against the wall. It shattered, sending shards flying. She is violent. Look, she is throwing things. I stood up. I stopped slurring. I stopped swaying. I stood tall, smoothing down my shirt. Are you finished? I asked. The room went silent. The baby was still crying, but Tiffany stopped screaming. She looked at me, confused by the sudden change in my demeanor. What? She breathed. I said, Are you finished with your scene? Because the police are already on their way. I called them 10 minutes ago. Tiffany laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Good. Let them come. They will see what a junkie you are. I walked over to my desk. I picked up a remote control. I pointed it at the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It showed the kitchen from last night. High definition, clear audio. Tiffany appeared on the screen, crushing the pills, stirring them into the water. Sleep tight, big sister. My mother gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. Arthur went pale. Tiffany stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That is, Haling. 2 hashes greater than that is fake? She stammered. That is a deep fake. She made it on her computer. I pressed a button. The video changed. It showed Tiffany in my room at 2 in the morning. I ripped up his picture. Haling. 2 hash is greater than. I wanted to see you cry. Tomorrow, you are going to have a little accident. Haling. 2 hash is greater than I will get power of attorney. Haling. 2 hash is greater than I will send you to a nice, quiet, padded room. The video ended. The room was silent except for the sound of my mother weeping softly. That is attempted murder. Tiffany, I said. Poisoning. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Filing a false police report. I looked at Arthur. Haling. 2 hash is greater than, and you. I pulled a document from my desk drawer. This is the loan agreement you signed. Clause 14. I am calling in the loan. $75,000. Payable immediately. Arthur staggered back, leaning against the doorframe. We, Haling. 2 hash is greater than we spent it. We bought Haling. 2 hash is greater than things. Then I will take the collateral. I said, your pension, your half of the future inheritance. It is all mine. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Tiffany looked at the window, then at me. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. You bitch, she screamed. She lunged at me, handing the baby to my mother as she charged. I did not move. I let her come. She tackled me onto the bed, clawing at my face. I raised my arms to protect myself, but I did not fight back. I let her scratch me. I let her leave marks, because the hallway camera was recording. And now I had assault. Arthur pulled her off me. Stop it. Stop it. You idiot. The police are here. I stood up. I touched my cheek. It was bleeding. Perfect. I whispered. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. 2 uniformed officers burst into the room, guns drawn. Police! Separate. Now. I raised my hands slowly. Officer, I said, my voice calm and steady. My name is Reagan Vance. I am the homeowner. I would like to press charges against this woman for assault, poisoning, and attempted murder. The evidence is on the screen. I pointed to the television. Tiffany was panting, her hair wild, her eyes manic. She looked exactly like the crazy person she had tried to paint me as. "It is not what it looks like." She screamed at the police. "She is the crazy one. She is the villain." The officer looked at the paused video of Tiffany pouring white powder into a pitcher. He looked at the scratch on my face. He looked at the broken vase. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back," the officer said to Tiffany. "No, my baby. I have a baby." "You are under arrest," he said, snapping the cuffs on her wrists. I watched as they dragged her out of the room, kicking and screaming. I watched my mother collapse onto the floor, sobbing. I watched Arthur stare at me with the realization that his life was over. I walked to the window and watched them shove Tiffany into the back of the cruiser. The confrontation was over. I had won, but as I looked at my bleeding face in the mirror, I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I was the queen of a broken kingdom, ruling over a pile of ashes. The arrest of Tiffany Moore was not a quiet affair. In a town like Westport, where the police blotter was usually filled with noise complaints and minor traffic violations, a domestic assault involving poisoning and high-stakes fraud was the equivalent of a nuclear detonation. The sirens had drawn the neighbors out of their warm homes, pulling them to the edge of my driveway like moths to a bug zapper. They stood in their bathrobes, clutching their coffee mugs, watching as the patrol car flashed its lights against the gray morning sky. I stood on the front porch, a towel pressed to the scratch on my cheek. The cold air stung the wound, but it felt grounding. It reminded me that this was real. Inside the house, the remaining structure of my family was collapsing. Arthur was sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. The paramedics were checking his blood pressure. It was dangerously high. My mother was pacing the living room, holding Leo, who was wailing with a hunger that no one was attending to. A black sport utility vehicle pulled into the driveway, followed by a sedan with the state seal on the door. Child Protective Services. My mother stopped pacing. She looked out the window and gasped. "No," she whispered. "No, they cannot take him." Arthur looked up, his face gray and sweaty. "Do something. Reagan, fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I looked at him, the man who had signed away his future to impress a daughter who despised him. "I cannot fix the law, Arthur," I said. "Tiffany is in custody. She has no husband. You are physically unwell. Mom is complicit in a financial crime. Who exactly is fit to care for that child?" "You are," my mother cried, rushing toward me. "You are his aunt. You have the house. You have the money. Tell them you will take him." I looked at the baby. His face was red and blotchy. He was innocent, but he was also a tether. If I took him, I would be tied to Tiffany forever. She would use him to crawl back into my life, to manipulate me, to demand access. The Child Protective Services worker, a stern woman with a clipboard, walked up the steps. "Miss Vance?" she asked. "That is me," I said. "We need to take custody of the infant, Leo Moore, pending an investigation into the mother's fitness and the safety of the home environment." My mother stepped forward, shielding the baby. "You cannot have him. He is my grandson. I will take him." The worker looked at my mother, then at the police officer standing beside her. "Ma'am, the police report indicates that you were present during the alleged poisoning attempt and failed to intervene. You are also named as a person of interest in the financial fraud investigation. We cannot place the child with you." My mother looked at me, her eyes pleading, desperate. "Reagan, please, say something. Take him, just for a few days. Do not let them put him in the system. I looked at the worker. Then I looked at my mother. I cannot take him, I said. My voice was steady, but my stomach twisted. I work 60 hours a week. I am single, and this house, Saoyutsinghal, Ling, 2 hash is greater than this. House is a crime scene. It is not safe for a child. Reagan, my mother screamed. How can you be so cruel? He is blood. He is evidence. I thought, but I did not say it. I watched as the worker gently took the baby from my mother's arms. My mother collapsed onto the floor, wailing. It was a sound of pure, primal grief. The neighbors could hear it. The whole town could hear it as the Child Protective Services car drove away, carrying the last innocent piece of this disaster. My phone began to buzz. It was the community Facebook group. Someone had live-streamed the arrest. The comments were already pouring in. Did you see that? Tiffany Moore got arrested. I heard she tried to kill her sister. Wait, is that not the sister she said was abusive? The police took the baby. Oh my God. Then a new post appeared. It was from an anonymous account, but I knew it was Miller. He had leaked the paternity test results to a local gossip blog. Scandal in Westport. Local tycoon Harrison Sterling, father of Miracle Baby? DNA test says yes. The bomb had gone off. By noon, the news vans were parked at the end of the driveway. They were not there for me. They were there for the Sterling connection. Harrison Sterling was a public figure. This was front page news. Arthur was taken to the hospital by ambulance around 1 o'clock. His blood pressure had spiked to stroke levels. My mother went with him, leaving me alone in the house. I sat in the living room, the curtains drawn. I opened my laptop. My inbox was full. My boss had emailed me, Reagan, in light of the recent police activity at your residence and the media attention, we think it is best if you take a leave of absence, effective immediately. I had been suspended. The career I had built for 10 years, the reputation I had guarded so fiercely, was tainted by the sewage of my family's drama. I deleted the email. I did not care. I had enough money to live for 20 years without working. At 3 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I checked the camera. It was a man in a suit. I recognized him. It was Harrison Sterling's lawyer. I opened the door. Miss Vance, he said, looking past me into the house. I represent Mr. Sterling. We would like to discuss the Saoyutsinghal Ling. Those materials. Saoyutsinghal Ling. 2 hash is greater than regarding the child. There is nothing to discuss. I said, the police have the DNA results. Child Protective Services has the child. If Mr. Sterling wants his son, he can go to family court and claim him. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Sterling is a married man. He values his privacy. We are prepared to offer a substantial settlement if you can. Saoyutsinghal Ling. 2 hash is greater than facilitate a quiet adoption. Perhaps to a family out of state? They wanted to buy my silence. They wanted to erase the mistake. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You are too late. I said, the internet knows. His wife probably knows by now. I stepped out onto the porch and pointed to the news van down the street. Go talk to them, I said. Tell them how much privacy Mr. Sterling values. I slammed the door in his face. I walked back into the kitchen. The house was silent. The baby's things were still everywhere. A bottle on the counter, a bib on the chair. The white noise machine was finally off. I was alone, but the fallout was not just external. It was internal. I walked past the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. The scratch on my face was turning purple. My eyes were dark circles. I had won. Tiffany was in jail. Arthur was ruined. The baby was gone. The Sterlings were exposed. But as I looked around my beautiful, expensive, empty home, I realized that victory felt a lot like a funeral. I had cut out the cancer. Yes, but in doing so, I had carved out a massive piece of myself. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for a cleaning service. I want everything gone. I said, the crib, the toys, the boxes in the foyer, everything that is not mine. Burn it. Donate it. I do not care. Just get it out. When? The woman on the line asked. Now? I said, tonight. I sat on the stairs and waited for the cleaners. I scrolled through the comments on the news article about Tiffany. Monster. Sao yu ting haoling. Dva. Psycho. She deserves to rot. And then, one comment caught my eye. I feel bad for the sister. Imagine living with that. She must be so lonely. I turned off my phone. I wrapped my arms around my knees and rested my head on them. I was not lonely. I was safe. That is what I told myself as the sun went down and the house grew dark. Sao yu ting haoling. 2 hash is greater than I am safe. The silence in the house was not peaceful. It was sterile. It smelled of industrial strength, bleach, and lemon polish. The scent of a crime scene that had been scrubbed until the raw wood was exposed. The cleaners had come and gone, taking with them every trace of the invasion. The crib was gone. The boxes of stolen merchandise were gone. The white noise machine that had haunted my nights was gone, but the ghosts remained. The legal proceedings moved with a swift, brutal efficiency that surprised even me. Tiffany was being held without bail. The district attorney, sensing a high-profile win involving the Sterling scandal, threw the book at her. The charges were a laundry list of moral and legal failures: aggravated assault, administering a noxious substance, filing a false police report, and 3 counts of fraud. I sat in the deposition room 3 days later, watching her through the glass. She looked small in the orange jumpsuit. Her roots were showing, a dark stain spreading against the bleached blonde, exposing the reality beneath the facade. She did not look at me. She stared at the table, picking at her cuticles until they bled. She had lost the baby. She had lost her freedom. She had lost the game she thought she was winning. I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, just a cold, flat observation of cause and effect. Arthur did not fare much better. The stroke he suffered in the ambulance had been massive. It had turned him into a prisoner within his own body. He was paralyzed on the right side, unable to speak, unable to feed himself. The doctor said he would require 24-hour care for the rest of his life, and because of the contract he had signed, the contract he had laughed about while drinking my wine, I controlled his assets. I liquidated his pension. I seized his half of the retirement savings he shared with my mother. I used every penny to pay off the mortgage he had tried to leverage. I did not pay for a private nursing home. I had him transferred to a state-funded facility in Bridgeport. It was clean, but it was gray and smelled of boiled cabbage and despair. It was the best his remaining equity could afford. That left only one loose end. My mother returned to the house on a Tuesday afternoon. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. Her skin was papery, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. She had been sleeping in the waiting room of the hospital, clinging to the wreckage of her husband. She walked into the kitchen where I was drinking tea. She stopped, looking around the empty room. She looked at the spot where the high chair used to be. "Reagan," she whispered. Her voice was a cracked, broken thing. I did not offer her a seat. I did not offer her tea. I stood leaning against the granite island, my arms crossed. I packed your things, I said. My mother flinched, as if I had struck her. What? Your boxes are in the garage. I continued, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. I hired movers. They will be here in an hour to take them to the storage unit I rented for you. You have paid for 3 months. After that, it is up to you. Reagan, please. She sobbed, stepping toward me. You cannot do this. I am your mother. Where am I supposed to go? Arthur is. Saoying Haling. 2 hashes greater than Arthur is gone. Essentially, Tiffany is in jail. You are all I have left. I looked at her. I looked for the woman who had bandaged my knees when I fell off my bike. I looked for the woman who used to read me bedtime stories. She was not there. In her place stood a stranger who had watched her stepdaughter spit in my food and said nothing. A stranger who had signed away my home to buy her husband's love. You made your choice. I said, you chose them. You watched them steal from me. You watched them humiliate me. You watched Tiffany try to poison me. And you were going to let them commit me to a mental institution just to keep the money flowing. No, she cried, shaking her head frantically. I did not know. I thought she was just Saoying Haling. 2 hash is greater than troubled. I wanted to keep the peace. I wanted us to be a family. There is no peace without justice. Mother, I said, and there is no family without loyalty. You failed. I walked over to the counter and picked up a single silver key. It was her key to the house. The key I had given her 3 years ago when I invited her to live here. Thinking I could buy the childhood I never had, I held out my hand. Give me your key, I said. She stared at my hand. Tears streamed down her face, dripping onto her coat. She trembled, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief. Reagan, baby, please, I love you. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not waver. I did not blink. The key, I repeated, slowly, with shaking fingers. She reached into her purse. She pulled out the keychain. It had a little photo of me in a plastic frame attached to it. A photo from my college graduation. She looked at it one last time, then dropped it into my palm. The metal was warm from her hand. It felt heavy. The movers will take you to the motel on Route 1, I said, pocketing the key. I paid for a week. You have your social security. You will figure it out. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. She was looking at the monster she had created. She was realizing that the daughter she had neglected had grown into a woman made of iron and ice. You are cold, Reagan, she whispered. You are so cold. I am what you made me, I said. She turned and walked out the door. I watched her go. I watched her walk down the driveway. A small, defeated figure against the gray sky. The wind caught her coat, whipping it around her legs. She looked frail. She looked pathetic. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. Saoying Haling. Twa. Click. The sound echoed through the massive, empty house. I turned around. The foyer was vast and pristine. The light from the chandelier reflected off the polished floors. It was perfect. It was exactly what I had wanted. My sanctuary was restored. My father's legacy was secure. I walked into the living room and sat on the sofa. I looked at the spot where the Christmas tree usually went. It was empty. I waited for the satisfaction to hit me. I waited for the rush of victory. I waited to feel safe, but all I felt was the silence. It pressed against my eardrums. It seeped into my pores. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. I picked up the remote and turned on the television, just to hear a human voice. The news was on. They were talking about the weather. A storm was coming. Another one. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders. I was shivering, even though the thermostat was set to 72 degrees. I had won the war. I had annihilated the enemy. I had protected my territory. But as I sat there in the dim light, listening to the wind howl outside, I realized the cost of the ammunition. I had fired every bullet I had. I had burned every bridge. I was the queen of the castle, and I was the only soul within the walls. I closed my eyes and listened to the empty house breathe around me. It sounded like a tomb. 6 months have passed since the sirens faded from my driveway. The ice of winter has melted, replaced by the manicured green perfection of spring. The azaleas lining the walkway are in full bloom. A vibrant explosion of pink and white that masks the rot that once festered inside these walls. The house is quiet now. It is the kind of silence you find in a museum or a mausoleum. The legal loose ends have been tied into neat, impenetrable knots. Tiffany took a plea deal. She is currently serving 5 years in a minimum security facility in Danbury for fraud and extortion. The baby, Leo, was placed with a foster family in upstate New York. I heard through the grapevine that the Sterlings quietly set up a trust fund for him, a hush money payment to keep their surname out of future headlines. Arthur is still alive, if you can call it that. He exists in a state-funded nursing home, staring at a television he cannot understand, trapped in a body that betrayed him. I pay for his toiletries. It is the only mercy I afford him. And my mother? She is a ghost. She lives in a small studio apartment above a bakery in town. I send her a check on the 1st of every month. It is enough to keep her fed, but not enough to give her freedom. She calls me sometimes. I watch the phone ring until it stops. I do not block her number. I just like to see that she is still trying, still reaching out to the hand that cut her off. I have reclaimed my sanctuary. The study has been restored. My father's desk sits exactly where it belongs, free of scratches and baby powder. The Mercedes is back under its silk cover, the paint flawless, the gouge erased as if it never happened. But the town has not forgotten. I see it when I go to the grocery store. The whispers in the produce aisle, the way the neighbors turn their heads when I drive by. They do not see a victim who defended her home. They see a monster who sent her sister to prison and threw her mother onto the street. They call me the Ice Queen of Westport. I do not mind. Fear is a form of respect. Tonight, I am sitting in the study. I found an old VHS tape in one of the boxes I saved from the garage. It is labeled Christmas 1998. I slot it into the VCR I keep for nostalgia. The tracking lines flicker. And then, there he is, my father. He is sitting in this very chair, holding a glass of scotch. He is younger than I remember, but his eyes are the same. Cold, distant. On the screen, a younger version of me runs into the frame. I am holding a drawing. I am trying to show it to him. Daddy, look, the little girl says. My father does not look at the drawing. He looks at the camera. He looks annoyed. Not now. Reagan, he says, sharply. I am reviewing the accounts. Go play outside. The little girl's face falls. She retreats, disappearing into the background. I stop the tape. The screen goes black. For years, I told myself I was protecting his legacy. I told myself I was honoring the man who built this life. But staring at that black screen, I realized the truth. I did not fight Arthur and Tiffany because they were bad people. I fought them because they were messy. I fought them because they threatened my control. I have become exactly what my father was. I used my money to manipulate my family. I used legal contracts as weapons. I leveraged assets to destroy human beings. I am not better than Arthur. I am just wealthier. I am just more efficient. I eject the tape. I place it on the shelf next to the books I will never read. I walk downstairs to the dining room. The table is set for one. The silverware is polished silver. The crystal glass sparkles under the chandelier. A private chef came earlier to prepare a meal of roasted duck and wild rice. It is perfect. It is exquisite. I sit at the head of the table. The chair is high-backed and stiff. I look down the length of the mahogany surface. There are 11 empty chairs. I pour myself a glass of wine. It is a vintage Bordeaux, costing more than my mother's monthly rent. I lift the glass to the empty room. To family, I whisper. My voice echoes off the walls, hollow and flat. There is no one to answer. No baby crying. No sister complaining. No mother pleading. I take a sip. The wine is rich and complex, but it tastes like ash in my mouth. I cut a piece of duck and eat it. I chew slowly. The silence is so loud it rings in my ears. I am safe. I am rich. I am the winner. I smile. It is a small, tight smile that does not reach my eyes. It is the smile of a woman who has everything she ever wanted and absolutely nothing that matters. I take another sip of wine, and I sit there in the beautiful, cold, dark, waiting for a morning that will feel exactly like today.